Why is killing fun? Out of context, that might sound crazy, but you see, all gamers can relate to this feeling. This isn't new. I've done this on multiple occasions throughout different games, killing regular NPCs, but it is only now, as I drive my blade into people, that I even consider the idea that gamers might actually be messed up. I mean, we have to be, right? To find an appeal to this? But then I have to stop and wonder, where is my enjoyment coming from? At the core, at the very roots, do I enjoy massacring hordes of humans because I enjoy the challenge to see if I can do it? To do something that I would never actually do in real life? Or is it because I love watching NPCs suffer? But the thing is, it's not just me. Developers put these mechanics in their games for a reason. Look at media, news, movies, TV shows, even something like Instagram lean heavily into violence and discourse because they know that people eat that content up. Brutality, negativity, it's profitable, which means it's something that people want to see. Otherwise, developers wouldn't bother putting that out there. You think people would buy a newspaper if on the front page was a story about cute newborn puppies? But then the question becomes why? Is this just normal human curiosity, or do you have to be mentally disturbed to actually enjoy watching people suffer, even if it's in a fictional world? And I went back and forth with myself on this topic for a few days, but I found that there are two sides to this argument. Now, some people will tell you that we're naturally drawn to violence as humans, that it is part of human nature, and video games are just a safe way to explore that. Others might say that there is something deeply wrong with people who want to see brutality, even if it is in a fake setting. The latter, for some reason, feels a little bit tad more on the true side. I mean, to be honest with you guys, gamers are kind of a different breed. But just because we see some violence in a video game and we think that's really cool, I don't think that necessarily means that we're psychotic or mentally disturbed all the way. At least not in the sense that it's going to be a problem for anybody in real life, I think. If you like this video, drive a sword through the like button. If you don't, smash that dislike button with a warhammer, because all engagement is engagement. And tell me in the comments if you think gamers are mentally fucked in the head, or is this just normal human behavior? And I just want to say that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is an awesome game. I'm really enjoying it. But I also think it's kind of funny that this is the game that makes me stop and think, like, hey, is there something wrong with my head here? But anyway, welcome to the psychology of violence in video games.
Brother,
A study conducted in 2009 explored the motivational aspects of video game play. Their research found that gamers are, in fact, normal human beings like you and me. Go figure, right? However, the main takeaway from that study is that the enjoyment that gamers derive from video games is primarily linked to the satisfaction of basic psychological needs such as autonomy, competence, and relatedness, rather than the actual violent content itself. Now, this suggests that players are drawn to violent video games not necessarily because of the violence, but because these games effectively fulfill intrinsic psychological needs for the gamer, for the player. The need to feel like we have power and control, that we as gamers not only know and understand what we're doing, but that we know how to execute those actions and are capable enough of doing so. For example, at Trotsky Castle, after about 35 hours into the game, I learned the skills, got the gear, and learned the tactics needed to begin killing everybody in the castle, and getting away with it too, serving my psychological need as a gamer that says, hey bro, you got this, you can kill everybody here and you can get away with it. It got to the point where I did actually clear out the castle, and the soldiers couldn't stop me. They ended up running away from me, and that was actually kind of huge because that was a goal I'd set for myself, and I worked up to that for a long time. But then I actually hit my dog by accident and he ran off, and I felt so badly that I kind of like just took all my gear off, put the sword down, and just rode off. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. So now I'm actually playing the game normally, quote unquote normally. But it was just nice for me to know that, hey, I set a goal for myself and I was able to meet it. And that's the hugest thing for me as a gamer. But relating it back to the study, it shows that my predilection towards massacring an entire village or castle isn't founded on the joy that I derive from seeing NPCs in pain and in distress, but rather founded on the basis that I can have something long and hard to grind on and I can work on it to completion, thereby giving me a euphoric satisfaction from knowing that I could eliminate the entire castle if I felt like it. It's kind of like Souls games where you have difficult bosses to overcome, and once you do, it just feels good knowing that you're able to do it. However, on the other end, I found research which has indicated that gamers are psychologically disturbed beings. I just gotta say, as long as you're at home playing video games, I don't see an issue with it. Side note, I love my wife, but this is something that my wife told me a while ago when we were first dating. She goes, I'm glad you're at home playing video games, because that means I know exactly where you are and you're always right where I left you. I don't have to worry about you getting in trouble, getting hurt, or women talking to you, or you spending money at the bar. Because when you're at home playing video games, you're kind of saving money, right? Sure, you pay like $80 to $100 for a video game, but that's hours that you spend at home. But that's a side tangent. Let's bring it back here. The study basically says that when you're exposed to violent video games, it could lead to the desensitization of real-world violence. Now, the study focuses on video games specifically, but I would directly counter this study with a reminder that all media outlets produce and expose people to violence. But a study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that participants who played violent video games exhibited reduced physiological arousal when later exposed to real-life violence, suggesting a desensitization effect. This reduced sensitivity to violence could be interpreted as decrease in empathy towards others' suffering. Could be. The study also states that playing violent video games also increased aggression. Now, while I understand what they're getting at, I don't necessarily agree with that last part. Sure, as somebody who has watched Kratos rip Helios' head off and spread lead on a crowd in Modern Warfare 2 at the airport, I don't have a strong aversion or, honestly, even that much of a care when I see bad things happen in real life. Now, hot take, listen to me here. Let me explain. It's not that I don't think that those things don't suck. I know that they're terrible. I know that they are bad things, but I don't find myself calling up my friends to go and talk about it, which is something that my grandparents do. And that also kind of furthers the argument when you really think about it. But I have never known any gamer who has become more violent in real life as a direct and only byproduct of playing violent video games. If you know somebody, let me know. I would still say that they are an outlier, but I am willing to bet that there are other factors to consider. Am I the only one who isn't astounded or hysterical whenever I see something crazy happen in real life? Like the other day I was on the freeway and I saw a car on fire. It was just on the side of the road and it was on fire. It was the entire car. And I drove by it. I was just like, oh damn, that's crazy. But it's not the craziest thing that I've seen. So am I weird? Am I mentally ill? But let's be real. Humans have always been obsessed with watching violence, even way before electronic media was a thing. Gladiator fights in ancient Rome were basically real-life Mortal Kombat. People packed into arenas to watch men fight to the death for entertainment. Today, we love to watch action movies, boxing, MMA, same thing. Public executions were treated like social events. People would bring their families to watch hangings, beheadings, and burnings at the stake. True crime and horror movies make millions because people are naturally drawn to disturbing content. They want to see it. It's what the people want. Are you not entertained? Shows like Dahmer on Netflix, people binge watch them. My wife and I binged watch that show. I love my wife. Movies like Scream, Terrifier, Saw, and Hostel, gory as hell. They're designed to make the viewers watch suffering up close, and they keep making sequels because we keep watching them. Our heads might turn to the side or hide behind our fingers, but we're still watching. So, what I am saying, if I'm saying anything, is that history proves that people love watching pain and horror, even when it's real. Compared to that, killing NPCs in a video game seems pretty harmless. Of course, in video games, it's just pixels and 3D models, so it doesn't look real, it's not realistic. But you see, the key difference between video games and real world violence is consequences. In real life, violence is terrifying because it comes with guilt, responsibility, and irreversible damage. But in a game, none of that exists. We know that nobody is actually getting hurt, it's just pixels. And that is why people go crazy in games like Skyrim, Red Dead Redemption, GTA, or Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's because the world lets them. The other thing that stands out about these games is that they're very human or realistic, where the explicit core of the game isn't to murder people, the NPCs. Other games like Devil May Cry or Cyberpunk are different in the fact that the main thing you have to do in those games is kill. But in something like Kingdom Come, the player has to go out of their way to want to commit these actions, because you could actually beat the entire game with a pacifist run. You don't have to kill anybody, but a lot of players choose to, because it's naturally just more fun than trying to talk your way out of everything. Although I do think that is a challenge in it of itself. Like, you ever try beating Fallout without killing anybody? You know? Games are effectively sandboxes where everything you play within the sandbox, the castles that you build or the damage you inflict on the sand, essentially stays inside and doesn't hold real bearing on the outside. In video games, players treat worlds as interactive sandboxes, testing mechanics, pushing boundaries, and just messing around to see what happens. If a game lets you push somebody off of a cliff, tie them to a train track, or mass murder a village, you're going to want to try it at least once. Not because you enjoy the suffering, I hope you don't, right? But because as gamers, we're just naturally curious about the cause and effect of certain things. Just like a baby who throws food on the floor and watches it fall, only to do it again. But it's weird because I know for a fact I would bet $69 that if I ask my wife, who really isn't a gamer, and by all accounts relatively normal, to play Kingdom Come, murder would not be on her mind. I bet she would go around, talk to people, do everything normally, and not try to just kill people randomly. But myself, and I firmly believe most gamers, are at least curious about exploring those avenues. We have instincts as a gamer, and developers put these things in the game knowing and understanding our innate tendencies and curiosities as gamers. And that curiosity isn't necessarily bad, it's just trying something we wouldn't be able to do in real life. But then the argument quickly shifts to, well, why would you even want to be able to do that in real life? That's abnormal. Because most people naturally avoid seeing pain. We turn away from watching a lion eviscerate a zebra, or we get uncomfortable watching real-life injuries, and we generally feel bad whenever we see somebody else's suffering. That is empathy. But in games, if you're going out of your way to make NPCs suffer, if you enjoy seeing their pain, doesn't that mean you're missing out on some level of empathy? Doesn't that make you psychologically disturbed? Imagine if you saw somebody watching real-life gore for fun, in the same way that you watch Asmongold on YouTube. Imagine you just stroll into somebody's house and they're on the couch in their living room having a coffee, watching Human Centipede or a Serbian film. By the way, do not watch a Serbian film. And they're watching it casually, not even showing signs of disgust. That would instantly set off red flags, right? So why is it okay when the violence is digital? For example, watching a needle drive itself through Isaac's eye in Dead Space is something that makes you go, oh God, that's gnarly, that's crazy. Let's watch that again. 384,000 views on YouTube. However, if you were to watch somebody stick a needle in their eye in real life, an actual human being, that would be extremely disturbing and concerning. Let's say two people have the same desire to watch extreme violence. One watches real-life torture videos, and the other is watching violent video games. Obviously, the first person is much worse. But does the desire itself, the craving to see suffering, really come from a different place? Or is it the same impulse, just played out in a safer, less realistic way, through the video game medium? There's also the question of escalation. If somebody just plays violent video games all the time, is there a risk that eventually it's not going to be enough? Just like drugs? For an example, you can play in the snow for the first time and you feel like God for 45 minutes. Well, 40 to 45 minutes. And then you start to become desensitized. Before you know it, 1-2 white lines won't even last you for 25 minutes and you have to keep taking another bump. We know that overexposure to violence desensitizes people. I mean, just look at individuals with PTSD. So, what happens when the gore in video games stops feeling extreme? Do those players seek out even more disturbing content? Do they move on to real-life violence, even if it's just watching disturbing videos? It's not a huge leap to say that if you love watching suffering, it could be a sign of something deeper, but you would have to be the type of person that loves watching suffering specifically. So, are gamers mentally disturbed? Maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I don't think that gamers go into games saying, "Oh yeah, I need that shit. Let's see some horrible stuff in Hello Kitty Island Adventure so I can get my fix and perpetuate it into real life." But let's be real, if it's in the game, it's kind of hard not to test it. It's hard to resist not wanting to test it. So, no, I don't think that makes gamers completely psychotic. Maybe you're a little different and crazier than a normal person, but it doesn't make you a psychopath, it just makes you human. Or maybe you should do what I did. Lean your head back away from the screen and ask yourself, why do I enjoy this? One psychological explanation for why gamers love violence is that it serves as a coping mechanism for stress and emotional regulation. A study published in Frontiers in Psychology suggests that players often engage with violent video games not because of the violence itself, but because the game allows them to escape stressors and regain a sense of control in a safe environment. And this is pretty common knowledge for gamers. We play video games because we want to escape any issues with real life. It's a great way to blow off steam, to just decompress. It's definitely better than taking your stress out on anybody else who happens to be around you. However, while violent video games might serve as an outlet for stress, a way for us to displace any type of aggression that we might feel inside, there are those who would righteously say that relying too much on them for emotional release can lead to things like emotional avoidance, where instead of processing anger or frustration in a healthy way, some players might retreat into violent video games as a crutch, suppressing their emotions rather than addressing them. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know all about the psychological issues with repressed emotions and trauma and any type of issues that might ail you. Click the video on the screen to see the harmful effects of keeping your demons to yourself.